Okay, so I want to say thank you so much for everybody showing up today. My name is Lisa Erickson, and I'm the CEO of Potion Enterprises and the creator of the Magick brand, and Migraine Magic is what really kicked it all off for me. So how this is going to go is I'm going to tell you a little bit about um, my experience, my 30-year journey with chronic migraine, and then what really prompted me to find a solution, not only for myself, but for helping transform for well over 20,000 migraines for other people. And then ultimately creating a solution. And I'm going to actually bridge the physics or the biochemical physics and the metaphysics of migraine, which is what I think just really needs to happen now. And this is why there's like, and this is all my opinion, by the way, this is why there's over 1 billion people right now that are still suffering with migraine. And I just think it's unnecessary. Like, I know it's unnecessary, especially in 2020. So, and then I'm going to show you how to find your own migraine pattern. And actually any kind of chronic anything, the flare-ups happen during these times as well. So whatever else you have going on, I'm going to give you the treats and snacks that I tell my private clients. And I'm going to tell you a minimum of the 3 root causes that contribute to your migraine. So, a little bit about me. So, I grew up in the outskirts of Massachusetts, right? My mom and dad were childhood sweethearts, but my mom got pregnant with me when she was 17, and back in the 70s when that was like a big no-no. And then they subsequently went on to have 4 more children in addition to me, and we were poor. Like, we were poor. And I have a 19-year-old, and if he had a baby right now, there's just no way. Like, no way he could handle it. So, I give it up to my parents for hanging in there and doing what they do, and especially when really the whole world was against them at that time. But this is important, and it feeds into my migraine story a little bit later. So when I was about 7 or 8, I was getting these really bad headaches, and my mom took me to the doctor because I was getting really nauseous with them as well. And the doctor said, well, you don't throw up. This isn't a migraine. It's just a really bad headache, and you don't throw up with them. So, okay, you didn't really question the doctor back then, even though, my mom knew and I didn't know. I was, still little. And then they found out that I actually had an extra set of teeth, which is wild. It's completely uncommon. So in being in this business and working with thousands of people by now, helping them to transform their own migraine, I realized that the extra set of teeth, they were just headaches. But if you take what was going on in my environment at the time and how the teeth that weren't really supposed to be there were using additional energy and biochemical reserves in my system, and then I was like suffering these really bad headaches, the chronic headache pattern morphed into a chronic migraine pattern because I was just getting more depleted. I was just feeling more pain. And there was just like a deeper neural entrainment going on. Hang on 1 second. People are starting to come in. And bear with me for 1 second. So my migraines grew. And sorry, I'm trying to get a hold of these people on Facebook that are pinging me that they're not able to get in. Okay. And my dad was an 18-year-old supporting us, you know, probably feeling, even though he loved my mom, but probably feeling like he had to marry her, right? Because here I am pregnant. I mean, here's my mom was pregnant. And so my dad actually fell into drinking and gambling. And my mother was uber codependent on my dad. And so you have this mix going on as I'm being like stewed in my mother's womb. Like my father, when he found out my mother was pregnant, like took off across country to see his older brother because he was scared. Like, what am I going to do? You know, it's not that he didn't want to marry my mother. It's just that he wasn't ready for a baby at 17. He had been drafted by the Bruins. You know, he had potential things going on. But he chose to stay, and then, you know, he started drinking, and there wasn't a lot of money, so he started gambling. And I mean, I'm fine with it now, but when I was little, it really was hard on me, because it seemed like the drinking and the gambling was really where his priority was. And so I didn't feel like a priority. And then my mother was so heavily steeped in her codependence. I mean, she was crazy about my dad too. But I began to really resent my mother from staying. And as much as I didn't want to see my family broken up, I was like, you got to divorce this guy. Like, all the money's going out the door. Like, there were days I didn't have lunch money. Okay. But I need to really correct that, because my mother would scrounge the house. Like, that was when you had one car, back old school. Like, my father worked, my mother didn't work. She stayed home, she watched the kids. So she would scrounge, and she would, like, you know, get pennies. But I was too embarrassed to go to school with like a Ziploc. I wasn't doing it, right? And then she didn't want to, but she had brought up to me that, you know, we can get you like reduced lunch or free lunch probably. And I was too proud, because I knew how the other kids were treated. And I wasn't that, right? Anyways, so the migraine, so here I am, I have these bad headaches, I have this teeth thing, I have this, you know, family environment thing. Like, I was completely embarrassed of my family. I was ashamed of my family. I was ashamed of myself. And I hid it all. I hid it all. And I started like overachieving. But my definition of overachieving, it's not like I was an Olympic anything. It's just like I just tried to be really good at whatever I did. So the headaches got worse. They became regular in high school. They got even worse in college. And then I was married to my first husband, and they even got worse, because I knew that like it was for all the wrong reasons. And then when we got divorced, my headaches didn't go away eventually. I really hoped that they would, but they didn't. So now a few years pass, and, you know, I had a child with my first husband, and then I meet my second husband. And really, really, really good man. And we had 3 more children together. But the migraines were just coming like back to back to back. And so I want to show you, because I didn't show you the last time, but like I was having severe, severe chronic migraines raising this crew, like 4 little ones. Okay, my picture's aren't in there, but I mean, that's a lot of energy to work with, right? And when you have migraines, you are at the same time overwhelmed and underwhelmed. And it seems like a polarity that can't exist, but you're overwhelmed energetically and you're underwhelmed biochemically. And then the more overwhelmed you get through stress or whatever, the more the biochemistry inside your body gets zapped. And if you're not replenishing it specific to migraines, because there's a specific way to replenish the migraine brain, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, then you're continually robbing the really special magical nutrients in your body. But there's another piece to that, and that has to do with, in case I forget, I'm just going to say it right now. On the cellular wall, there are these little doors. And when you're getting robbed biochemically, these little doors, these little pumps that open and close to bring like the base nourishment for the migraine brain in, they don't open and close. So you really never ever get what you want. And then another piece to this is if you're drinking tons and tons and tons of water, you're not doing yourself a service with your migraine, because the water's not actually getting through those voltage gated channels, they're called, and bringing in the nutrients that your nerves really need. And on top of that, they're flushing out anything that you actually have in your system right now that could potentially help you. So on the last masterclass, I told everybody, Google your urine chart. And what you want to do is, first thing in the morning, when you get up, you want to look at the color of your urine. And if you're drinking a lot of water, your urine's probably really, really, really light. You'll see the hydrated color, and that's what you want to aim for. So if you're drinking a ton of water, if you're drinking like the recommended amounts, you're probably drinking too much water for a person with chronic migraine or migraine in general, because it's just flushing the stuff that's already in there that needs to go into those channels that can't get into the channels. So it's just sitting there and you're peeing it out. So I would tell you that I forget what the data is, but people with, I can't say migrainer anymore because like that's not the official term. The official term, I think, is people with chronic migraine, which is so stupid because the people that say that's the official term haven't even figured out what's going on. But anyways, where was I? So the water. Oh, okay. So people with migraine pee 50% more sodium out of their system than non-peer. So I would ask everybody here, and if you can, just, drop it in the chat, a 1 if you pee a lot. And in Boston, we'd call you a wicked pisser. So that's the thing. So Google the urine chart and see where you're at, and only drink really if you're thirsty or if you feel your body needs it. And I'm not a doctor, so you can always check this with whatever I say, please check it with your physician if you feel you need to. Yeah. So I can tell you more about the whole sodium dump thing. It's called like a sodium dumping, or you can look at that on your own. But it's just my years in the trenches and in the fields and working with so many people. And I have to add that, I am endorsed by a cardiologist, a neurologist, a gynecologist. Many doctors, unfortunately, and this breaks my heart, will send people to me because they just, in their scope, can't, they feel that they've come to the end of the road, and luckily they own that they feel they can't do anything more for their, patients. And it's too bad because all they really need to do is look a little deeper. Okay. So I'm remarried and I now have 4 children, and I'm just getting whacked every day. Like, technically speaking, you cannot have a migraine every day, because if you haven't heard of the migraine, there's a migraine pattern. And so if you guys get aura with your migraine, just drop a 1. Some people don't, but it's usually like a 36-hour window. And before, did you want to say something, Melissa? me see. I can't unmute you.
No, I'm good. I was just listening. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So technically there's like a 36-hour window, but every single person is different, and every single migraine is actually not the same. They're infinitely different. So your window of your migraine pattern, and your migraines have a pattern. If you have any chronic anything, even though I'm not an expert in anything else, I would say that your chronic anything truly has a pattern, and it's just really up for you to map it and kind of figure it out yourself, or work with somebody who's already been down that road. So, okay, so now I'm remarried. I'm getting whacked with, chronic migraine, chronic headache. I was diagnosed with intractable migraine, cluster headache, new daily persistent headache. There's like 18 different kinds of headaches. There's like 18 different kinds of migraine. And I swear to God, I have been watching this whole, because I'm in the personal development field and I'm around a lot of healers, and I'm seeing a whole new migraine actually crop up with a whole new different pattern. It blows my mind. Okay, so I have spent so I've been in business 8 years. So the 10 years prior to that, I had spent time studying Eastern medicine, Western medicine. I actually was going to school to become a psychiatrist, and then I realized that I had to work on a cadaver, which I didn't think I had to, and I can't even I unless there's nobody else, I am no help to anybody when blood's involved, or even pain. Like I cannot handle other people's pain. I would so much rather kids, other adults maybe not so much, but like kids and stuff, I would just rather hold it and carry it. And in the moment, if I could do that, I would probably think twice. But it's just like it hurts me when other people hurt. So it's like 10 years going by. Even though I had chronic migraine, I still was a wicked trooper. I never complained. I rarely ever went in a dark room, unless it was like those migraines that really were like off the Richter. Like, the ones that there's no stopping it. So it's like the migraine pattern goes like this. You have aura or you don't, and you have what's called a prodrome, which is the buildup. And this is very important because in my experience, when you know what your prodrome is and you know your pattern, this part of it is where you can actually either reverse it or redirect it in a whole nother way. If it gets to the attack phase, you're done. Trying to redirect a migraine when you're in the attack phase is like trying to slam the brakes on a runaway locomotive train. You can't, it won't stop. You might get the rear brakes to stop, and then the rest of the train will, careen? Is that the word? Will careen out and smash into other things or topple, and people will die. That's not the way you can do it. And that's why traditional medicine tries to abort the migraine and even the preventatives, because I'll tell you, I was on all kinds of medicine for 20 years, prevention, abort, and nothing. When I say nothing worked, nothing worked. And so here are just, I probably have millions of these of medicines, okay, that I did, no, these are all full. So that's good. They actually have the medicine in them, right? Well, they're full. And they would I would get prescribed for 4 different things, like an antidepressant, because I'm not a clinically depressed person. But when you're in that much pain, pain changes you. Pain changes people. And also, not in pain changes people too. So I was on all kinds of the triptans, they gave me like Zoloft, which I tried to take, and that helped a little bit, but what happens is, your neurons start to fire differently and around it. So you basically just go, when you're not getting to the root cause, you just kind of go back to baseline. The stronger pattern prevails. The only thing that I could count on was Migraine. And I could count on that like 60% of the time to abort a migraine in process. And then, I would have to lay down because I would go to sleep for like 2 hours after that. And then Furicet sometimes works, but I started to develop, I started to get dependent on it. And so the rebound headaches from that are ridiculous. They hurt so bad. So all of this is to say is that allopathic medicine did nothing for me, and I tried, and I still took it knowing that it didn't help. I don't know. I still hoped like a miracle would happen, that it would just one day work. This is how my mindset was working. Like if I left the house without my medicine that didn't work, I would drive back to get the medicine that didn't work. I mean, and then even like when I would go to Thanksgiving at my family's house, I love it. She's gardening, doing this. This is great. I really do love it. Even like when I would go to family events, and Thanksgiving was the big one because we were like all around the table. And, I come from like an Irish Catholic suburb of Boston. Like we weren't good Catholics by any stretch of the imagination. But the way we showed people we love one another is we tease them, which is really screwed up, but that's just how it is. So everybody would rank on everybody else, and ultimately somebody would get offended. So like on the way to my parents' house, I would like pop a Furicet just in case, but it doesn't work like that. And then I would get there, and then, I knew I was going to get a migraine because the 20-something Thanksgivings before I always got a migraine. And then I'd be like this, and then I'd be just being like drinking wine because like something's got to give. And then I'd take another Furicet. I mean, it was awful, but I can't be the only one that would do stupid shit like that, Anyways, I was of the mindset that somebody else was going to save me, or that maybe some miracle medicine would come around. And it didn't, and it hasn't. So one day, the straw that broke the camel's back was one day, my daughter, who's 14 now, she came downstairs when she was 6, and she had her blankie, and it was tattered, and how kids' blankies are, and I just knew. And like I live on the cranberry bogs, and everything happens on the bogs. Like I was looking over the bogs, and my daughter comes downstairs, and she's like, Mommy, sound and light hurts. Like I hurt so bad, I feel like I'm gonna throw up. My hands and my feet are cold. I know, it's And so back to that thing about like the pain, as a very sensitive person, as we all are. And whether you have physical children, furry children, flying children, like, or just really love, or like really mama, it kills to see other people in pain. And the real piece about a migraine is that there's nothing we could do. Like at the time, there was nothing I could do, knowing I couldn't even help myself. Like, how am I going to help my baby? So in that moment, like literally in that moment, I either like created a sacred contract, or a sacred contract went off of my DNA, but an atomic bomb exploded in my heart. And the atomic bomb was a mother's love. And I literally in that moment was like, not on my dime. If there's any way that I can change the trajectory of my daughter, or any of my kids, but at the time my daughter, following in my footsteps, and in terms of my 3-decade odyssey with migraines, I'm going to do it. And I didn't know how, and I didn't care, but you guys know, like, sometimes the things we can't do for ourselves, we can do for the people that we love, no matter what. No matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody thinks, it doesn't matter. Like, that's the love. So that was the spirit in which I then went on to create Migraine Magick, which is the kick-ass solution that I made to help my daughter and to help me. But this masterclass is about what the solution taught me about migraine, because that's how it worked. I didn't know what I did. I didn't know how I did it. I do know I made a wicked big mistake, and that was the best mistake I ever made. So once I created it and I started working with it, I needed to understand how I made it, because I am extremely skeptical by nature. Most people with migraine are wicked skeptical by nature. And that's just a disposition. But even then, with nothing really working, I get it. Like, me too. If I had come along to me 20 years ago, I don't know that I would believe me, but times have changed. So this is what happened. And this is, this is more of like the sciencey part of it. Let me just make sure I'm not leaving anything out. I do have some notes to refer back to, but I'm not really looking at them. Oh yeah, and just so that you know that I can relate to you, like, before I created the solution, like the migraines, I sleep with a fan on to this day. I always have. I need the white noise. And well, I'll get to that after. I would sleep with huge crystals on my head, because I would find the pain points, and I would lay on the pain points. It's almost like it would hurt good. So much so that I actually have a crystal dealer, and when she comes to the house, my husband is like, please don't sell her any sharp crystals anymore, because he'll roll over and like stab himself. And he's not a crystal. He's like a farmer with a pitchfork. Like, he's not, into any of that. God love him. So, okay. So here's how you can figure out, before I get into how you can figure out your pattern, I want you to know that people with chronic migraine structurally have a different brain. So when I was backtracking and figuring out the science of what I made, I reached out to all the different physicians and professors that I quoted them in like my thesis. And one of the people I reached out to was a neurological professor of imaging at Harvard. And because I was quoting how people with migraine structurally have a different brain. And so how it's different is that we have a zillion more neural connections and a zillion more neural wirings in our brain. So if we're not actually eating specific to feed the electricity and magnetism, but that's a whole separate thing. If we're not eating specific to feed the migraine brain, then you're getting further depleted. Okay, does that make sense so far? Yeah. So here you are with the migraine. You're not eating specific to the migraine, and whatever you're eating, it's probably not the best anyways, because even if you have a great diet, the culture of which the food is grown isn't great. Like, even the dirt's not good. So just, you got to know that we never had a chance, honestly, because nobody knew about the brain. Nobody knew that it needs to be like fed a certain way. And what you need to know is a migraine needs fat, good fat, and salt. Not table salt, but you guys probably all have Himalayan salt, right? So the fat, when you get the salt, it transmutes into the brain as electricity, right? And so that electricity will make sparks, and when the sparks spark and then the neurotransmitters talk, they're inside this myelin sheath. So the fat is what you need to make sure that that insulation of the myelin sheath helps conduct the current of the spark to the next one, into the next one, into the next one. And so a lot of times people with migraine, and if under like the MRIs, they'll see that that sheath is deteriorating. So even the current that you have, it doesn't have a good connection. It's like trying to run, you know, a 220 hair dryer on a 120 volt system. You're gonna blow out your fuses, and if it keeps happening, you blow out your transformers, right? Your main circuits. So the tip for the best snacks that I have ever come across, if you like them, is salted pistachios. And oh my God, what did I forget? I think anyways, salted pistachios, and anytime, that's what you need. Okay, so that's for the electricity, and then for the fat is avocados. So if you guys like avocados and if you can eat salted pistachios, great. If you don't like them, then I'll give you another snack. But I mean, I always have them, and they're great to eat, like, you know, often, not just like when you're getting your migraine. And the other thing to do is to introduce a glass. Like, you guys ever woken up in the middle of the night with a migraine out of your sleep? It's brutal. It's brutal. It's brutal, right? So the way you can start to prevent that is, unless you're lactose intolerant, start drinking I don't know, like a 6-ounce glass, not water, of cream, whole cream. And if you can't do that, you know, whole milk that's fortified. Okay, so because the four main elements that you need is potassium and sodium, those go together, and magnesium and calcium, those two, they work together. So that's why, like, if you're eating chocolate, most people crave milk. So that's so that the magnesium and the calcium in those things, they work together to try to open those gates on the cellular wall. And then you have potassium in the nut of the pistachio, and you have the salt around it. So those, hands down, are the best. Now, in a pinch, pizza. Pizza has the fat and salt. That's like my favorite thing in the world. You know, another, I wasn't even going to say this, but another tip, like if you're on the road and you don't have your stuff, if you go through, like, I mean, I have Dunkin' Donuts here, so I'll get coffee. I happen to like caffeine, but a lot of times that can not be so great for other people. And historically, like, what I'm saying now doesn't work all the time. It's kind of hit or miss, depending on where you are in your pattern. But I mean, I've chugged culottes and given myself brain freezes. You know, I've like had orgasms, but I don't know, it seems like the fallout from those two things is like further depletion. So I don't really, like, you hear that, but I don't really recommend that. But if you're going through Dunkin' Donuts and you have a lot of tension, I would get the wake up wraps and I would put them on my shoulders because they're so hot and the heat will really go into the muscles. But that's just, I wasn't meaning to go there. So that's your snack, and that has to do with the migraine brain. That's how you can start to feed the migraine brain. And now the migraine pattern. So how you can figure out your migraine pattern is, well, how is everybody's head feeling? How is everybody feeling right now in this moment? Like, I'm just going to unmute everybody and I'll ask you each. Like, Allison, how do you feel right now?
Hit or miss. So I have this sitting right here. So I've been using it kind of on and off. So I'll feel good, and then all of a sudden I'll have a little bit of tension and I'll spray and it goes away. And so
Okay.
it's kind of back and forth.
Okay, so you're feeling some kind of way. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. Melissa, how are you feeling?
I'm just getting off a 3-day migraine, so I'm kind of hungover. I've got a bit of a migraine hangover, and it's still kind of sitting.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Okay. Do you happen to know, have you ever realized a pattern of yours, or are you just always in pain, like low grade, high grade, you know?
I feel like I've always got a migraine. I know that you just said that that isn't a thing, but I feel like it can be triggered quite quickly, quite easily with stress particularly. But I have been tracking it on a calendar. So like I definitely get them 3 days before my cycle starts. And then they pop when stress hits and when the barometric pressure shifts.
Yeah.
Before the
So
rain.
I personally believe and have experienced and have witnessed like headaches just crossing over to a migraine, even though I know a lot of doctors say clinically, but I don't buy that because I know that it can happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And you, Miss Bridget, you don't have one, right?
I do actually have a little bit of stuff going on, but I don't really get migraines anymore, but I do get some kind of headaches.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
a little coming in, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So your cycle, so here are, like, this is all umbrella, right? Because everybody's so different. But basically 3 to 5 days before the full moon and the new moon, okay, that's typically when your pattern will kick in. And so if you know that, and then the new moon, I feel, is the most brutal and is actually the last migraine it's the hardest nut to crack out of all the migraines, aside from cluster headaches, but we're just talking about migraine. That is the hardest one because there's such a discrepancy in the hormones. It's like, and it just like does such a thing to the feminine nervous system. But I had a guru once, and he told me that the reason this particularly happens, and so I don't completely agree with him, but I agree with this piece, like everything that can go awry in the body has to do with the distribution of fluids. So blood, lymph, water, and there's really a lot to do with that. I agree with that. And what happens during these the moon cycle correlation is, for the full moon, what's happening is all the fluids are being drawn up to the head. And so this is how I can describe and get on board with the old migraine theory with its, vasoconstriction and vasodilation, like the blood vessels constrict and expand. And so that's part of it. And so all that fluid is adding a lot of pressure and tension in the head, the cranial cavity. part of that has to do with the cells not being able to open and close and allow the signals, specifically for the sodium potassium pump, to get in there and like give, you know, the hormones the messages that they need to work, and also to regulate the fluid so there's not such a buildup, so there's more of a circulation of it. So that's what goes on around the full moon. And then during the new moon with your cycle, Melissa, I think it's probably around the new moon, 3 to 5 days before that. So, I mean, if you have a calendar, like I'm old school, so I have a paper calendar. And I used to have one available on my website, but I haven't updated it yet. I actually did it all for you guys. I went through the whole year, and I would say, okay, this is the danger zone. So just make sure you got all your, like, front load the danger zone, like with everything you need, because it's like your migraine is going to come back. So we'll say, like, we'll use you, Allison, for an example. Like, you just started working with Migraine Magic. And so in it has all the stuff to provide you to be able to go through that migraine attack in the very beginning. Because it's like, when you have a migraine, it's like going into battle without a gun or a shield, or it's like going into war, and you're in an open field, and like the Japanese are coming at you with all the, like, you don't have any protection because we just don't know. So this is what I did. I created this stuff used in a certain way to amp up the system, to lessen the frequency and the severity and the pain, so that when it hits, it's not as bad. It will be like 2 hours instead of 3 days, or whatever it is. And for some people, it's just exactly what they need, and they just don't get them, or they get a few. So me personally, I get maybe 6 migraine a year, and it's because I'm lazy. Like, I just stopped on the self-care and doing what I need to know, because I know what triggers me. So this is how you can start finding out, like, really what your migraine pattern's like. Really track it, and then you guys are all pretty conscious, so you can kind of figure out and feel into, like, is this really a migraine? Is this really a bad headache? And then here's the other thing. Like, I know people, I used to say this too. I used to know my triggers. If the Schumann resonance was spiked, I would get a migraine. If the bar, I knew 2 days before a storm, I would get a migraine. If I drank, I would get a migraine. So honestly, I mean, I love my migraine right now, because in hindsight, I know how it's like literally saved me. So like, I probably would have been an alcoholic if I didn't have the worst hangovers and migraines. Like, it was not worth drinking. And I love to drink. Can't, it's not worth it. So the thing with all of those triggers, because I know if I asked you, in your migraine career, there had to have been one time where you actually drank or ate something that you would traditionally get a migraine that you didn't. And you were really pleasantly surprised. Like, maybe you went to that wedding reception and you had a blast and you didn't get a migraine. Or there has to have been like one time. Maybe you can remember, maybe you can't, but I'm sure of it. And so the 3 main root causes of migraine really have to do with having this anticipatory, heightened sense of perception. So if you think back, I mean, you weren't born with migraine. Somewhere probably when you were younger, something was going on and it just kind of like imprinted into your system. So does anybody want to share, like, how old, do you guys know when you had your first migraine? Can you unmute yourself and tell me?
Me?
Allison, then Melissa, then Bridget.
So I was 30 and it happened when my daughter turned 1 on her actual first birthday is when I had my first ever migraine. I didn't even know what it was. My mom, yeah, and both my parents have migraines, and so my mom had to tell me, you got a migraine. I mean, I wanted to take a gun and shoot my head off. It was horrible.
Yep.
So, yeah, so they started at 30 and they did exactly what you said. As I grew older, they just got progressively more significant, till I hit about 40. And then they really ramped up to, a couple of months. My worst was 11 days in solid pain. But yeah, now I've kind of gotten it down to 1 a month, and it definitely is around the moon cycle, for sure.
And looking back, do you have, so that's the other thing, like, it's definitely in the DNA and the genetics. And if you follow epigenetics at all, it takes a trigger.
Yeah.
But for that trigger to happen, there's at least 3 different imbalances that have to be pre-existing to like really bing it from your
right
DNA.
Yeah.
So was there other stuff kind of going on in the back?
Not that I would have known, whether I was just overwhelmed at that time by having kids and life. I don't know.
Do it.
But yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Thanks, Allison.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Melissa, do you know how old you were?
I do. I was 7. I was at a choir practice at my church, and a thunderstorm hit, and it was the first time I got one. And I remember they put me up in the I was in a church pew staring at the cross, praying that I wasn't going to die, because I thought I was going to die. I thought it was dying. Yeah,
I bet.
that was the first one I ever got. It was very dramatic.
It's scary.
Yeah. And then they calmed down, and then I started getting them again really badly in my late teens, early 20s. And yeah, they've been pretty consistent ever since.
I'll tell you, when I used to this is so stupid. When I was in high school or younger, and this doesn't even have to do with migraine, because I had those extra set of teeth. What happened was, you can see it's kind of, you can see the gum is kind of higher. So with these extra set of teeth, I didn't have that song, All I Want for Christmas Is My 2 Front Teeth. I had that for 3 years in a row because my 2 front teeth wouldn't fall out. So they had to take them out, and they wouldn't fall out because they were being held in place with those extra teeth up there. And then what so wild. And then what happened was they took them out, but then my teeth wouldn't come down because they were crowded by these 2 extra sets of teeth up there. So they had to put braces on and wire and manually pull my teeth down. Oh my God. Anyways, I used to think, I don't think I ever said it out loud, but I was like, yeah, I'm a champ. I can take the pain. I'm a champ. So fucking stupid that I was even thinking that. But I thought that now looking back, right? So when you get the migraine, you develop a really big tolerance for pain, even though it hurts. But when you get rid of the migraine, that threshold goes, phew. So when I get that occasional migraine now, oh my God, I am like the biggest baby. I'm like, how did I live like this? Like, no human should have to experience this amount of pain. But when I was in it for 30 years, I couldn't see it, nor could I believe it. But now, I mean, it will bring me to my knees. Like, just, there's no trying to hide it. There's no trying to deal with it. Like, I'm in my room, like, doing what I need to do. You can all, I don't care what happens. I don't care. Like, I cannot handle the pain anymore. So, yeah. Thank you, Melissa. Bridget.
Yeah, so I think, this is funny that you're asking me this because I had this memory. I think it was yesterday. I remembered there was a Christmas. I was 4 years old and I got super, super sick. And I think it was migraine because I felt like I was dying. And I just remember I had to lay on the couch and everyone was having like dinner and like all this stuff. And I just wanted it all to go away. And it was Christmas, so it was such an exciting time. And it was the last year that we had actually lived around family. We moved after that and didn't have a Christmas with big family for a really long time. But I didn't get them a lot as a child. They sparked up again really bad when I was in my 20s, when I was in grad school. And then I started getting like visual migraines, and it just got like super bad. And it was stress. And I found like a food trigger that was a big one for me. And because I went to the neurologist and they're like, okay, here's all the medications. And so that, and all the side effects freaked me out so bad because I always have side effects from medication. So that's when I was like, and it was kind of by the grace of God that I found one of the things I was really sensitive to that was in gum. And I had heard people say, oh, sometimes diet stuff gives you headaches, migraines. And I'm like, well, I don't have any diet stuff. And then one day I looked at the package of the gum I was chewing and it had this phenylalanine in it. And for me, that was my biggest trigger. I still get them a little bit sometimes, but they're mostly, I just mostly get like cluster headaches now.
Oh, you do?
I think they're cluster headaches. I don't know the definitions.
Well, a cluster, it's different. Like a cluster, so like a migraine, it's more you're still.
Yeah, I don't get those anymore.
The cluster headache, it's a different kind of pain and you can't be still. You like, you want to bang, like it's bad. It's different.
Yeah, that's more what I get now when I get the pain. But they're not very frequent.
How are you? Do you get allergies? Besides that, you don't suffer from allergy, right?
No, lots of hormonal stuff. Very, very up and down in the hormonal department. So tapping into learning about my cycle and what the strengths are during certain times and how the moon affects it and all of that stuff has been really helpful for me.
So for cluster headaches, it's a little bit different. So you're a client of mine. So if the cluster headaches are what you actually get, the next time I send you something, I made this rinse that you guys could all make on your own actually, because I have a couple cluster headache customers. The biggie is oxygen. So if you get a really bad cluster headache, call your doctor or your neurologist and tell him that you want oxygen for cluster headache.
Okay.
That will break the cycle. But in the meanwhile, you can make yourself, I have this little, it's like a nasal spray, and you can make yourself a Himalayan kind of Soleil, like Google SOLE type of a thing. Or you can just, you want to put enough salt in this little vial that you can get up your nostril. And so that after the salt's dissolved, you actually can see the salt in the little vial. So it's like a little squirt bottle with a long little spout. And if you get it all the way up there and you start doing that regularly, my clients have really good luck with that.
Nice.
And then we got them oxygen, medical oxygen. So
Right now, I'm not really working. Like, I've done a ton to support my self-care routine. When I have a job on top of taking care of the kids, even when I have help, that's when they come back in because I just feel so overwhelmed. But I've done well for a while, just building a very strong self-care routine.
good. But that's just a tip. Like, God forbid, hopefully it doesn't.
Right. I know.
So you've got the migraine brain, you've got your snacks, you're going to figure out your pattern. Okay, so now the 3 root causes. So you're already sensitive with a brain that requires more electricity. So we have this heightened sensitivity that happens actually before the migraine starts. And then as a result of this heightened sensitivity, we have our reaction system. So it's either fight or flight or freeze. That was mine, freeze. And then there's a new one that they came up with, fawning, which is basically people pleasing till the cows come home, right? So if people are, this wasn't really my situation, but people who are kind of in abusive situations, they will just people please because they want to avoid, but that's a fearful response. It's not, it's not healthy, but that's how they learn to survive. And then what happens with that overload is, you guys probably all know, it's like, it releases the negative hormones. And then it can lead to adrenal burnout. And then those things happen, right? But then what those things do is they mess with the electrolyte balance. So fundamentally, under every single migraine, unless, now I know there's allergies, so that could be a little different. There could be things that happen to people structurally, like, they get into an accident and it messes with the spinal fluid, here we go with the fluids again. So I'm not really speaking to that. I'm speaking to people who seem to be okay, have done all the tests, which, make sure you get an MRI and all that, due diligence with your doctors. But what's really going on, this hypersensitive, excitable brain, because our brain is really excitable, is that there's a biochemical intolerance, because those voltage gated channels on the cellular wall are not able to open and close. And so it's all a voltage issue. Voltage, voltage, voltage. You get the physical voltage, you get the mental voltage, and you get the emotional voltage. You get the voltage you need, and your migraine is going to transform. It really is. And it's going to require commitment on your part, because you've suffered for so long. So this is how deficient you are. So dehydrated is not water. Dehydrated are these electrolytes. So I was 30 years dehydrated and I had no clue until I started backtracking and seeing like where their stuff was happening in my life. And the other piece, another cause is gluten intolerance. So I'm not saying that, like, some people aren't, like, I'm not gluten-free. I probably should be, but I'm not gluten-free. And actually another diet that works really well for migraineurs, so I don't go the nutrition path. And I'm not a doctor. So these are the things that you can ping off them. My real expertise has to do with the electrolyte imbalance and then all the metaphysical pieces. So you have gluten intolerance. So what happens with that is gluten is like a carbohydrate. A carbohydrate messes. Did I say gluten? I meant glucose. Glucose intolerance. I'm sorry. Glucose further dehydrates you. It pulls the water out of the cells that's already there. And we do need the water, but we need the minerals contained in that solution that are inside the cell. So that's like the intracellular stuff. And it means that, we have like this suboptimal concentration of minerals that are needed for this proper electrolyte homeostasis. So the electrolytes is the energy that we feed our body. Like, that's why, if another thing, I don't usually recommend this, but white Gatorade's a good thing to have on hand. So it's kind of like, if you feel a migraine coming on, you know your pattern. Then you start to pay attention to how you feel during the prodrome. This is after you break through, Melissa, like when you have a little respite and you feel good and you actually have the energy to be able to observe what's going on. You feel it coming, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. I know the sugar in the Gatorade is probably going to further dehydrate me, but in the moment, it's going to give me the energy I need then to like continue on and maybe like get my ducks in a row so that I can properly weather out the attack that's coming. So it's like the aura, the prodrome, the attack, and then the hangover. And then the hangovers get worse as you get older, because the hangovers used to feel really bad, but now they feel like, I don't know, like day surgery. You're recovering from day surgery. So, heightened sensitivity, then the negative, well, they're not negative, they serve a purpose, but the hormones and the electrolyte disruption. And then the other thing that I want to mention is the migraine brain. It's like people with migraine are brilliant, like absolutely brilliant. And if you think about all this extra wiring, they were natural people with the migraine brain way back in like the caveman days. They were the people that really took care of the tribe. Like, they were the ones that really tuned into the moon. They hunt by the moon. They would cook by the moon. They would do everything by the moon. And that's why we're so tied into the moon cycle, because we have those extra neuronal circuits. But in present day, we're not getting fed what we need, and then we have all these extra frequencies further like running through those circuits and really acting as energy deficits in our system. So let me see. Okay, so unless you have any questions, we'll take like a 10-minute break, and then I'm gonna go into like all the other stuff with the migraine. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm gonna press pause and then put my video pause for a minute, and then I'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, so what I want to talk about in the second half is I want to talk a little bit about like Chinese medicine and how I was led to work with that and start pulling it in. And then probably going to seg into another experience I had in the middle of a migraine. And that's going to kind of talk about how it's going to kind of fuse into the Chinese medicine, but it has more to do with like archetypes and shadow pieces of us. Because, sorry, ladies, but there's a lot of shadow with the migraine. As much as I would like not to say that, it's true. So please know I'm speaking to you from my personal experience and just working with hundreds of people. So I'm not saying you have this or you have that, but I mean, I got to be hitting on some things somewhere, okay? So the metaphysical piece of the migraine fundamentally is, so if the physical piece in my experience is not enough voltage to fuel all the things that are imbalanced so that we have a beautiful full foundation to live life through and not let, you know, the weather take us out, the criticism take us out, the kids take us out, like whatever's going, like not being on the right life path take us out, right? Like we're holding this polarity of, this is my job, but I'm miserable and I know this is what I want to do, but I'm afraid of what they'll say, or I don't know if I'll be able to make it, you know, all these things. So the one thing that at the heart of a migraine is not being able to trust yourself, not being able to trust your body. Because the thing about the migraine is, because they seem to happen like all the time, you never know when it's going to spike. So for me, like if I started, this is before I knew all the mechanics of mine, but if I was out and like some of the are like, I could feel some of the stuff, but I might not actually be consciously engaged with it. But once the relentless tension in my neck got jacked up, diesel. If the migraine tension or pain got to like the bottom of my earlobes, like I could work with it or hold it off till I got to like a safe place to crash, to let it rip. You know, like they call them the weekend migraines, where all week long you can go to work because you really got stuff to do. But the minute you come home, you're like on the couch all weekend, because like, so that right there is indicative that you actually have some control sometimes over your migraine. But if the pain or the tension got above my ear, there was no hope. There was no nothing. It just, the attack came. So there's a mistrust of the body, which is really the disconnect from our being, from our essence. And it has to do with a lack of self-love. And the lack of self-love then starts to crop up, however it's going to crop up for you. So what I see with a lot of migraineurs, there's a lot of anger. There's so much anger. There's so much, that so many hopes and dreams that they had, that just somehow or another they weren't able to bring through fruition. And this emotion gets trapped, and it gets trapped in the liver and the gallbladder meridians. So if you were to touch your toe next to your pinky on your foot, like if you went into where it like connects, I bet you it would be really, really tender in that spot. So when you get a chance, just kind of play with that fourth toe. So that's part of where the meridian, the liver and the gallbladder meridians, they run. They're like spiritual highways, these electromagnetic channels that run through the body. Everyone's familiar with meridians? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So when we become angry, a lot of resentment's a biggie. And sometimes even if we're constricted, part of our response could be like barking at people, like really exploding, and not necessarily exploding like, you know, a huge temper. It's more of like, how can I word this? It's more of like, if we don't know a better way, it's almost like off-gassing to create a wall so that their energy can't get like in, like we can't tolerate any more energy. We can't take in, and we don't have anything to give. So it's just like creating this invisible cloak of protection. Yeah. So if you find yourself having any kind of liver stuff, you might, or if you feel you're becoming easily angered, a lot of times it can be like there's congestion in the liver. So that's a biggie. So for migraineurs, there's a lot in the solar plexus area, because a lot of it has to do with our self-confidence. And the greatest number of neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine are produced in the gut. So that being said, if you think about how we are metabolizing life, people with migraine, we're not. We're just standing upright trying to get through, really. Like, there's no intake and digestion of a lot, and there's a lot of fear programmings running on autopilot, and it starts off with, oh my God, I can't get caught out in public with a migraine. Like, I need to, like, the goal becomes, let me be close to where I can have a migraine in peace. You know, like, so then you want to think about, if there's disturbances in the liver and gallbladder meridians, how are you digesting life? How are you metabolizing life? How are you assimilating this constant barrage of noise coming from our consciousness and our unconscious? Like, you really, like, write those questions down and like just contemplate them. Contemplate on them today if you don't already like have an answer. How are you metabolizing your consciousness and your unconsciousness? And then when we're not able to metabolize a lot of this stuff, if it doesn't get digested, it starts accumulating. And so the other little detour I want to add here is, half of the reason why a lot of the medication that doesn't work, it's because it doesn't get digested. So maybe it would work, and maybe it would be of benefit if it didn't have terrible side effects. Like, so let's just say that the medicine is really good for you, but you don't even get the benefit of it because our metabolism system is messed up, like legitimately messed up. And I would be remiss not to give you the heads up that people with migraine are predisposed to insulin intolerance. Okay, so and then, you know, what's after that? After that is diabetes. So that has to do with the assimilation of glucose and stuff like that, which is, you know, and then that's where I got carbohydrates, because a lot of the glucose is in the carbohydrates. Okay, so when you need to understand, and I know you understand it already, and it's always good to rehear these things. When we have a thought produces the emotion. So a thought that is on the lower frequency spectrum, that's not in service to loving yourself, anything less than that, is producing an emotion that's corresponding with, you know, certain neurotransmitters and hormones. So the thing about Migraine Magic is when you think a thought, and or if you notice right now in your body, if you feel any kind of density, you spray it. This is in addition to the pain management protocol with it, but you spray it. And when you spray that piece in your body, you're actually interrupting the signal from the corrupted thought current, because anything that's not pure and in our highest service is corrupted somehow. It's some kind of limiting belief or imprint that we picked up along the way, because otherwise we would be treating ourselves a lot better and we wouldn't have migraine. And so then if you've done some consciousness work, you can actually reprogram that purified cellular area, but we're not going into that today. So the liver meridian also governs the eyes and the tendons. So it's just kind of, you can be aware if you're starting to lose some flexibility, or your stuff's kind of going on with your eyes, or if you had regular migraine and then all of a sudden it kind of morphed to, you know, ocular migraine. Just, you know, if this resonates with you, then adding acupuncture, or I actually like acupressure a lot more. I love acupuncture too, but you might want to think about that as part of your protocol too, if you're doing stuff that already works for you. All right. Then, so that's what's going on with the solar plexus. That messes up with our confidence. And I'm going to come back to the solar plexus in a minute, but I want to talk about like the left brain and the right brain. So the left brain is like the more masculine, doing, getting, you know, shit done. It's like the gas pedal of the brain. It initiates thoughts and all stuff like that. And then the right brain is more creative. The right brain specializes in like nonverbal communication. So, and that's the more feminine part of the brain. It's the more chaotic part of the brain, where the left brain is more structural. So I kind of refer to them as the masculine as the left piece and the feminine is the right piece. One is not better than the other. The left piece gives form to the right. So when you think a thought, it's just kind of there. And then it's like the left brain kind of gives you the ideas of like, oh, how to bring it into existence and how to maybe act on it. And the right brain also gives us the ability to empathize with people, empathize with people. And the interesting thing about it is when I talk about how like we picked up our response, like the fight or flight response or freeze, this really happens. Everybody has a different number, but it really happens around like 3 months, where we're able to mirror the people that were in our immediate environment. So we have these mirror neurons that that we use, but they're not really ours. They're not original to us. So if no one teaches us really how to respond and how to kind of like take care of our emotions, our responses could be those of like our early caregivers. So mirror neurons. What else? Oh, and the other thing about that is when a migraine hits, it shuts down the whole digestive process. So I don't know if you guys have ever been in the situation, and you know, it might be TMI, but like sometimes when the pain is so bad, it's like, you know, it can come out different ways, you know, and so nothing is getting digested. It's just flowing through. So any of the stuff that could potentially help you is actually just going through you. What else do I want to talk about? Well, whenever we're stressed, there's a drop in the neurotransmitters. So there's usually a drop in serotonin and a few of the other neurotransmitters. And when those are not at optimal, they're not at their optimal functioning process, then again, there's another interruption of the electricity that gives the signals for all the other stuff to work, you know, holistically in tandem, because this is a holistic, you know, it's not just like the head. Like a migraine is a whole body thing. And honestly, majority of the time, it starts in the gut, because that's where the majority of the neurotransmitters are created or not created. Okay. So, you know, another thing that can contribute to a migraine, a lot of stuff is, you know, having a lot of toxicity, being extremely acidic in, you know, your fluids. And then a lot of like adrenaline and cortisol being in the system as it relates to our fight or flight thing. So that's what I want to talk about that. Now I want to talk about like going deeper into the emotional body. So I need to tell you, if you don't know already, that we have like 10 different bodies. 9 of them are subtle. No, 8 are subtle, 1's physical, and then another one is electromagnetic. And that's just kind of what I want to say for now. So, and the elixir I created supplies the voltage, and it works on the electromagnetic level. It's made to, if you use it as I prescribe, and you literally bomb yourself in it for 2 weeks, like solid. And this, you know, everyone's different. So sometimes some people go through 3 bottles a month. Some people go through 1 bottle a month. It's more upfront because we're trying to bring the body to a homeostasis so that you can feel well enough. Because the thing is nobody gives a shit about this energy stuff when they're feel like they want to bring a gun to their head. Doesn't matter if, you know, it just doesn't matter. But it's extremely, extremely important, because this stuff preceded the migraine in one shape or form or another. And then, you know, when you're in the migraine and you're just like feeling like you're not thriving, you're just existing, this stuff comes back and it builds. So one time, so I had that experience with my daughter, and a really interesting thing that I want to mention is that I had this one coach once, and we were talking about, you know, my business, and she's like, well, why was it okay for you to figure out this for your daughter, but it wasn't okay for you to do it for yourself? Because I had tried for 10 years. So that was a really important question that, you know, I thought about for a little while, but then as I started doing a lot more deeper work, I was like, yeah, why is it? So that question had kind of been floating around in my psyche. And then I don't remember if I had already been working with Migraine Magic or if I hadn't created it yet. Either way, I had a migraine during the story that I'm going to tell you. So another thing that you can do while you're kind of in the middle of it to give yourself relief, this is not preventative at all, is I would fill the tub By the way, Epsom salts, they don't do too much. I was in the tub and I would fill it with really hot water. And I would have Epsom salts, but they really didn't do anything. And I would lay in it. And so the hot water was really good to little bit help relax my muscles. And then I would sit under the cold water. Like I would stick my head, my body would be in the hot water and I would lean forward. I would just have, the cold water beating down on my head. And it would like anesthetize the pain for a little while. So the blood vessels would constrict, but then once the cold went away, they would, expand, and sometimes it could hurt more. But anyways, I was in the tub, and I got mad. I got real mad. Like I was less like, I am so sick of this. And by the way, part of my anger stemmed from making a vow to never get mad, because I saw my father's anger and I said, I don't ever want to be like that. So I never allowed myself to express my anger. And anger is different from rage. So anger provides an outlet for trapped energy in the appropriate container. It doesn't mean you can call off and be like, everyone, but it's good to be able to express yourself. So I realized I had made a vow to never really get angry. And I don't think I ever really got angry for like 30 something years. Like I could mouth off and but I wasn't mad inside, it was more like frustrated or perturbed or aggravated or leave me alone type of a thing. And I just remember, I said, okay, at this point, I know that migraine is trying to communicate something to me. And it had been like 30 years, and I have not listening to what my body mind is sending me signals for. And because I'm not listening, it's getting louder, and like louder meaning it hurt more. It was coming more frequent. So, we have very, very strong minds, all of us here, or whoever's watching this, or a piece of it. And so it's like what we choose to, now some things, and now you're going to know a few more things. So then it's going to become a choice, like a choice to think a certain way, a choice to behave a certain way, a choice to eat certain things, a choice to be in a certain environment. And because your mind is so strong, whatever you put it behind, it's going to happen. And I also need to add that, like, I've meditated for 20 something years, but I'll say like 15 of those I wasn't really meditating properly. So it really didn't do anything. And so I back to the shower. So I'm sitting under the shower, and I just make a decision that I'm somehow going to table my pain for a second. I know it's going to come back, but I am literally going to override the pain. And I'm creating a space now for whatever answer that the migraine's going to give me. And I'm just going to let it drop in. And I didn't know if anything was going to happen. It was just like enough already. Like, okay, I'm here, I'm listening. Like, hang on, pain, you can come back. But for right now, so what I heard was, you don't love yourself enough. And that was a huge blow to my ego, because even though I was in so much pain, I was in denial. I was in so much denial. Like, how good could I be doing if I had been in pain for 30 years? Like, that is just not the way it's supposed to be. So I got that information, and then I had to sit with it. And so part of what goes on with a migraine is we have confused apprehension with fear. So apprehension is being afraid of unverified fear. So like if a tiger was chasing us, that's good reason to fear. But if you see a tiger every single time and you get like all nervous that it's going to chase you, like even if it's in a cage, that is not healthy. It's a misuse of apprehension. So I'd like you to, at some point, whatever is going on that seems to trigger you, there's always a stimulus and there's a response. And then in the middle of the stimulus and the response is the space. So that was the space that I created to be able to receive that particular message that was, I don't love myself, which was the seed to then be like, okay, well, first of all, I can't go public and say I don't love myself. But second of all, like, okay, I haven't loved myself in a long time, and I really want to learn how to love myself again. So I'm going to read you the result of that, which is this letter that I wrote to myself called Love Letter to My Migraine. And I'm going to share my screen with you. And I wrote this. Can you guys see it? Did I not share it? You can't see it yet, right? You can see it? Okay. So I wrote this, I don't know, in 2016, and I've never read it out loud. So dearest migraines, words cannot express my gratitude for you, because after all, it's always been about my feelings, my quality of essence, refinement of my emotions, and hope. First of all, I'm so sorry I blamed you for dishonoring myself. Dishonor runs deep. I see how I dishonored myself every single time I didn't accept the way I felt or behaved. I didn't realize that my feelings are my journey, and I didn't honor that. I now see that you were only trying to call my attention to the fact that I was not always acting on behalf of my highest good, and in doing so, disconnected myself from spirit. I see now you are my best friend. You are the most loyal, fiercest, courageous, and resiliently dedicated shadow aspect of myself that incessantly alerted to me to when I wasn't choosing in accordance with my highest good. And I am forever grateful I finally listened after 30 years. Because of your persistence, I face my feelings now instead of being in hell decorated with spiritual ideas. I'm accountable for all my actions. I take responsibility for my own state. I stopped looking outside for reasons for my pain. I'm sorry I let my issues get tangled up in the issues of others. I realized I wasn't comfortable being uncomfortable. You kept crying out over and over for my attention in the form of daily pain. I would not listen. I would try to snuff you out with medication and unconscious denial by deflecting my awareness out of the present moment. I now accept and love my shadow gifts, even though they are challenging, and I work with hope instead of expecting it to appear out of nowhere. I can finally see all the gifts that are on the other side of my migraines. When I ask myself, how did I get so lost? I know it's because I wasn't taught how to manage my feelings. And as the old adage goes, when we know better, we do better. So now I'm accountable for my own aura, chemistry, and emotions. I now flow through life and live without any emotional debts accruing. I learned to stop judging myself, and in that space, I stopped judging off others, work in progress. All that was required was self-honesty. I learned how to own my own stuff and treat myself and others with dignity no matter how they behave. And isn't it funny? Some people would call it grace. I realize that many of us have the same core wound or fall from grace, You taught me that there's an innocence in us that doesn't know if it matters or not. I'm sorry I used my pain to deny what I needed to uncover. Do I matter? Or if I matter, to who or for what, or how do I matter? I actually thought I was doing pretty well in life, as if chronic migraines weren't a loud enough wake-up call. The scoop is, there was this needling wound, a core belief that was on silent repeat in my subconscious. I used to feel that what I had to say wasn't important, or that what I had to say wasn't as important as what someone else had to say. I didn't realize this was even operating in me, but with your guidance, I traced it back to when I was a child. My perception was I didn't have a voice or a choice. The environment I grew up in didn't lend itself to me feeling acknowledged, or at least that was my perception. Migraines and MatCon taught me a very important question to ask myself in order to disarm my conscious mind. The important question is, how may I serve you? When I ask my innocence a question, I'm giving my own power back to me by giving my innocence a voice with choice. Asking that question to myself, sometimes I gently rest my right hand over my heart when I ask the question, and it changes my entire vibration. It imbues my field with self-worth, which raises my vibration, and believe it or not, increases my prosperity. I'm no longer someone who is programmed to view myself by the way other people see me or treat me. So I am feeling, dealing, and healing. I love you, migraines, because you taught me both the art of love and war. I prefer the art of loving you instead of resisting you. I love you, migraines, because as soon as I surrendered to you and loved you instead of battling the pain, you silently retreated into a white flag of love and compassion. And loving you, I was loving me. And all along, I thought I had to fight you. You taught me it's okay to feel overwhelmed, confused, afraid, abandoned, lonely, angry, happy, exuberant, excited, free, energized, but only when I actually am. You taught me it's okay to feel whatever I'm feeling as long as I feel it. The inability to feel what was arising in me contributed to many volcanic eruptions of my head. Carolyn Mace once referred to you, dear migraines, as geyser attacks of my brain. And then she asked me, what was I going to do about it? I quietly and humbly told her, I don't know. That was really like 9 or 10 years ago. Back then, I was hoping she was going to tell me how to solve my problem, but she didn't. I love you, migraines, because you taught me how to consciously breathe. I became conscious of the fact I was breathing shallow, and shallow breath constricts awareness. Deep breathing expands awareness. There are so many scientific and spiritual reasons to breathe deeply and consistently, which I don't need to get into here, but a thought struck me. What is the first thing that I did when I was born? Breathe. And what's the last thing I'm going to do before I die? Breathe. So what is the one thing I can trust and count on doing the entire time while I live? Breathe. There's magic in my breath, and I always come back to my breath. I used to hear yogis and contemplatives say this all the time and really never quite understood it. Some things the intellect just can't explain. I had to feel it and experience it. Mindful breathing creates space and awareness to see my issues at hand and regulate my organic nature. My breath taught me how to understand, nourish, and provide for my needs in conjunction with the cosmos. I love you, migraines, because you taught me how delicious, healthy living really is. You taught me the difference between high frequencies and low frequencies. You taught me about mindfulness, awareness, and management of my energy emotions. My awareness required that I forgive myself for many things, even silly things. Self-forgiveness made me more conscious of my choices. It made my life more simpler, more beautiful, and more peaceful. You taught me the ability to discriminate between physical and non-physical needs. I now see how I sometimes acted out of reaction versus responding. I think about all the underlying principles or triggers that contribute to you. Each migraine was infinitely different than the one before. One day's trigger could be another day's treasure. Before I pop a pill now, I meditate every day. Usually does the trick along with a daily scan of my emotions and migraine magic. I do try to eat properly, hydrate, exercise, and watch the weather, sleep regularly, but that doesn't always work. You also taught me that if I exist in a frequency where there's only love, then my remedy is love, and that manifests in all kinds of forms of self-love and compassion. I really still to this day can't believe how I silently suffered for so long. I never asked for help and I never expected it. I was used to doing it on my own. You taught me it's okay to need people. We all need people to a certain degree. My nature is still hypersensitive, and everything that I love and learned about you, I've incorporated into my lifestyle of migraine management as opposed to pain management, and I do my work. I love you because you taught me how to love myself more, not less, especially during painful times. You taught me how to change the way I associate love in my subconscious. I was told I love you by people I love. However, several times their actions demonstrated otherwise. Their actions were painful and not in accordance of the love they were speaking of. I now know their actions only show me where they were at in their journey, but I interpreted that as how little I mattered to them, or maybe even to life itself. And so my innocence learned to distrust. And I thank you because I know it's okay to admit that the other person's actions traumatized me, but I don't have to identify with it and walk around with a survivor sticker on my forehead. I love you because you forced me to get real honest with myself. When I feel sad, lost, afraid, joyous, blissful, enthusiastic, I now receive whatever comes my way and let it fuse into my DNA. I now trust everything. I began to reopen up my heart to life. I began to love it. I let it crush me, drown me, and I finally let life in me. And slowly I began to relax. The more I drop my incessant concerns about life and others, the more I radiate this presence inside me. So there's no more agendas, just love. You made me realize that I don't need help. I just needed to be reminded of what it feels like to be in the presence of love. And through it all, I realized fear is safe. It's a natural occurring emotion, just like joy. And I'm no longer stuck in fear mode or survival mode 24/7. I receive and trust whatever comes my way now. I consciously disentangle my codependent nature with you. Instead of waiting for you to happen to me, I love you daily. Dearest migraine, I'm sorry I associated you with pain instead of what you are, Grace. Grace, it seems inevitable, said Richard Rudd. Every day, the higher frequency of my migraine continues to shine new gifts into my life in place of the pain that once occupied decades of space. I sometimes wonder if we were to gather all the energy of pain contained in all the migraines, headaches, and anxiety of all the people who experience it in the world and flip the switch to that energetic pain body to a higher operating frequency, it could be as strong as, if not stronger than, a nuclear reactor for good. Just imagine that. I don't always know when grace will occur, and I can't make it happen. All I can do is prepare the soil, my nature, to be ready when it does. It's a transformational field in which I'm constantly being refined. The true miracle of my migraines is and was my shifts in perception when I finally asked you what you're here to tell me. I'm grateful to you that you never left until I realized your gifts. I love you because I know you are a form of divine grace. Grace is buried in every shadow. It's a gift given to us to open us up to another possibility. Grace can mean many things to many people, but it's also the same for all people. There are states of being that transcend suffering. Again, I quote Richard Rudd. When and if we meet again, it's always my honor to listen to what you are trying to tell me. And I ask you now every day, how can I serve you instead of waiting for you to come to me? I could go on and on about your gifts, but today I can honestly say that my chronic pain that led to my chronic pain condition was one of the best things that happened to me. I have been blessed to help several people cope with their migraines, headaches, and anxiety. And I know without a doubt you are trying to impart divine wisdom and grace. I love you, migraines, and it's time for your well-deserved rest. I got this now. So I wrote that back in 2016. And when I was referring to the shadow, again, I remember sitting out by the bogs, and I remember thinking that, you know, if I get well, like really well, I'm going to have to be responsible for all my actions. And it wasn't like I was irresponsible for my actions. It was, I'm going to have to deal with myself in terms of like, I can't just like project onto my husband, right? If I was feeling a certain way, I couldn't just be, you know, like emasculate him with my fire. It wasn't really anger, it was more frustration at myself. So I was going to have to be, I mean, like I was a single mom, and so I always got by, but I never really thrived. And so migraine was actually, for me, it erupted more frequently when I had to deal with something with like I didn't want to deal with it or take responsibility for my actions. So that's what I want to, and I want to end with these 4 archetypes of the shadow. And then I invite you, you know, not to live in the shadow, because you don't have to do a lot of shadow work to get better, but it's good to have them as a way to contemplate what's kind of going on with you, and it could release some stuff. So when I was knee deep in it and looking for someone to fix me, I was in the prostitute archetype. So if you're not familiar with these, Carl Jung, he was an Austrian psychotherapist, and he originally came up with these, and Carolyn Mace talks about these too. So the prostitute archetype is somebody who gives up her sovereignty. And I think for a lot of us, we might have come out of the womb not actually being sovereign anyways. Just, you know, like this word gets thrown a lot. It just means being completely in your own personal power. And when you're on the path of healing or holing, I don't even like the word heal anymore. I like the word holing, but then nobody would know what the hell I'm talking about. But it's like bringing all these pieces of yourself back together. And to really take it to woo exponentially, we're made up of trillions of cells, and they all have their own consciousness. So, I mean, even like the cells, when they come together to form a cohesive group, they create organs. So there's other pieces of our soul and our personality that have been fragmented just by virtue of not maybe going through certain developmental milestones that we needed. But our parents didn't know any of this shit, you know, like, so it's for us to understand and break the cycle, because when we're able to break the cycle in us, if it's a biggie, it goes back and it clears 7 generations, and it goes forward and it clears 7 generations. And if you have children, it's going to clear it for them. And if something kind of percolates up, you're going to see it and you're going to know it, and you're just going to know how to deal with it. It's just going to be your intuition, or you're going to figure out a way. So with the prostitute, she's like, the opposite of the prostitute is being a lover, just like really filling yourself up. So this is the thing with migraines. Like, if you're in the awakening, if you're trying to like really, you know, figure out what your personal power is, and it's different for everybody, and it's not even something you can articulate, because that's why it's part of the journey. If you were to Google, what is my personal power, nothing is going to come up, because it's specific to you. It's specific to your medicine. It's specific to your gifts, and it's for you to discover. So it's already inside you. But the people with migraine, they constantly think about what they can and cannot afford to feel, do, think, believe, and want. And they constantly compromise themselves, myself included, in order to feel safe. So a really good example of this is when women, it's mostly women, they will marry to feel taken care of when it's really not a good match. I mean, it may feel like it in the beginning, but then as time goes on and things start to unravel, what the fuck did I get myself into? Because we have compromised and actually not even known who we are. And when we're with migraine for so long, the hallmark of a migrainer is, I don't even know what I want anymore. Don't even fucking know what I want anymore. If it was to all be gone tomorrow, I have no idea. And that says a lot. I felt it, and that scared me. That actually scared me. Because then it was like, oh, well, if I got to figure out what I want, I mean, how do I not know what I want? And then I got to figure out what I want. What if I want isn't the right thing? So like, there's no trust. There's no knowing of self anymore, because the pain and the stuff that goes with it just robs us of any kind of personal power. And, you know, anything can like trigger. It can't, but for the sake of the conversation, it can trigger the pain, right? You guys know what I'm saying. So there's the prostitute. Then this one is really sneaky. This one is the I'm going to save that one for a minute. So then another one, the other side of the sovereign archetype is just being full on in their power and mastery, is the child. So I was more of a prostitute, but the child says things like, this isn't fair, sounds like this isn't fair. I'm not allowed. Somebody come fix me, right? Because children look to adults to fix them. So all these people, so yeah, I had the child archetype going, because I was like, well, maybe they're going to come up with a solution. So I was waiting for a solution. So somebody fix me. I had a dream. Once upon a time, I had a dream, you know, and then it goes unrequited. As opposed to the sovereign, who in tandem with the lover goes after the dream, gives to the self. So you may have heard in certain circles where, like in terms of manifesting or co-creating with the universe, you have to really fill yourself up. So I don't know if you have children, Melissa, but if you've had a child and you're in that 9th month, this is the best way I can describe it, because some people are like, I don't know. And you're like so pregnant. You're just like, I'm so full. Like, I am so full. I can't handle anything else. That's what I'm talking about, like with self-love. Like just filling yourself up so much, like not worrying about money, but of course you're not going to break the bank or sell the farm, but like taking the course that speaks to you, really buying yourself the things that are healthy and good for you, spending the money on yourself. I can tell you that when you get through that and you do that stuff, more comes. Like you start to trust the circulation of the self-giving, because that's communicating to the universe that you're trusting her, even if you're not. A lot of times for me, I am like taking that step off the cliff, doing things that scare me, but I know how it works. And every single time the floor will appear under my feet. And not to get too deep into intuition, but I will tell you that how many times have you not listened to your intuition and you've said, I knew better, I should have listened, right? It's a few times. But every single time you listen to your intuition, it's right on. So part of it is start listening to your intuition. And just in doing it, you will learn how to trust yourself more. So you have the prostitute, you have the child, and then you have the victim. And so the victim shadow is opposite. It's like how we manage our power around boundaries and space, and it has to do with our courage. So you'll hear a lot of people saying that they're migraine warriors, and it never really resonated with me. Although I definitely felt into, like, I'm courageous. I've always been courageous. I'm sure you've always been courageous. But a warrior, so the warrior is the transcended part of the shadow. So a warrior actually knows how to protect and enforce boundaries. Migraineurs have no fucking boundaries. Like, they're just like an open amoeba. Like, they just don't even know how. And the reason why is because the number one fear a migrainer has is being criticized. Like, you can do anything, but don't openly criticize me, please. And that's because we're not anchored in our sovereignty. We're not anchored in ourselves. It's because we don't feel well and we don't trust ourselves. So the victim shadow will pop up and sound like, well, first of all, they're ruled by fear and they're focused on disaster. So like a migraine is disastrous, right? We can all agree on that. But the victim is, if I don't behave, so it's more kind of like fawning. If I don't behave, I won't be loved. Or look at what they did to me. Or you gave me a migraine. And I'm not talking about joking. I'm like to kids, like, you got to be quiet. Even though it may be true, because our nervous system is underwhelmed, overwhelmed. But like, if you really believe it, then that's a sign of being in victim consciousness, because you know your kids can't cause your migraine. And it's not fair to say that to them anyways. And I've said it before, even though I know it's not them, it's me, but like, it's another way of saying, please be quiet. Or another piece of victim consciousness, if they're always pulling up, like, well, I can't, look at what happened last time. Like, last time I did that, I got a migraine. Or last time I said this, she did this, and it was, didn't feel good. So the last archetype I'm going to leave you with is the saboteur. And the saboteur is opposite the magician. So when you're able to like recognize your saboteur, and the saboteur is how we manage our power around time and reality. So the magician is the master of their own time. They just know things, and they don't make excuses for knowing things, and they don't explain how they know it. Half the time they can't anyways, because it's just the knowing, it's just the intuition. But the saboteur, and this is why I will never work with somebody who has a strong saboteur, because they will take so much of my energy. I'd have to give it freely, but they will take so much of my energy because they need to be convinced how to open a door that they have locked, cemented, and thrown away the key to. So a saboteur would sound and feel like, this is irresponsible. I need more information. This makes no sense. I'll do that someday. So if somebody was to ask me, like, let's say somebody said they wanted to work with me and they wanted to know why I'm an expert. First of all, I do have a lot of credentials aside from just having migraines. I have more recommendations from MDs and dentists that carry my products and all that. But you, at this, in where we are in 2020, you're going to learn to lead yourself by your feeling. So when I work with people privately, it's the only question they need to ask themselves is, am I your teacher? And that's for anybody, not just me, right? So if you're working with other people or if you have a teacher, you just simply ask yourself, is this my person? Is this my teacher? Because everybody's already blueprinted to work with people in your soul family. So all of us here right now are here for God knows what reason. It doesn't mean I'm your teacher. It just means that we all have something special and like wisdom for one another. So there are no coincidences. There's only synchronicities, which is why I've taken a lot of time for this, because I know it's very special. And I wasn't trying to go there, but why am I going there? Oh, so the saboteur, there was a woman who she's been wanting to work with me for over a year. And her husband is the heir to, I mean, money's not an option with this person at all. So if money's not an option, in speaking with her a few times, and it's okay, I won't work with her now. She's going to come back and ask, but I've now made my decision because people have sent me texts of her asking, like, did she really help you with your mind, things like that. And I'm not mad. I just know she has a strong saboteur, and I'm not willing to work with her because I like to get people over their hump and then go deeper and further and faster. I don't want to spend 3 months trying to break through a mindset that's already like, I've done everything else, this isn't going to work. And I understand it. So that's an example of a saboteur. So I am pretty much done. I'm just going to check the chat box. Mirror neurons are fascinating. Yep. Oh, Melissa, if you remember, I was breaking up. If you remember what I was saying, I can repeat it, but I don't know. So at this point,
I got what you were saying. I don't think it even matters.
You probably got the answer down the line. Does anybody want to comment, or did you learn anything? Do you have any questions about you?
I have a question. I think we're frozen again, though.
That's okay. I can hear you fine. There you go. You're unfrozen.
Okay. So definitely resonated with everything that you spoke about. And I'm curious for you, how long was your holding journey? When you finally gathered that awareness for yourself, how long did it take before you were able to shift it?
Do you mean the migraine or like my whole self?
Well, it seems like it's one and the same. So
it took about 6 months for me to just work with the pain, nausea, and tension.
Okay.
But what I would tell you is the minute I personally, and I worked with my medicine, the Migraine Magick. It's this. Okay, so this is the bottle. It's a spray-on topical. And the reason, so the minute I sprayed it on, I shit you not, 30 years of migraines was gone. Within 15 seconds, it came back. So it taught me how to work with it. And it taught me that I was just, and I mean, I just knew, like, I just knew there was no doubt in my mind that I was onto something. It was like my neurons were starving and they were like, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me. So that's how I learned to, with 30 years of migraines, took me about 6 months. And I mean, I was bathing in this stuff because I was making it. I wasn't, I had it on tap. And when I say bathing it, I don't mean like a bathtub, but just constantly spraying my head, neck, shoulders, and my belly. Because remember, the neurotransmitters are created in the belly, a lot of them. So that was what I was really focused on. And I had done a lot of the deeper work that dovetailed nicely. So that was 8 years ago. But it never ends, right? It just gets more fun. It just gets more fun to heal.
Oh, you're frozen again.
Oh, it just gets more fun to heal and whole. Like, so one of the things that I did was I was doing breath of fire, and that was able to release a lot of tension. But I remember being scared trying to do it in the middle of a migraine, thinking, oh, this is just going to make my head go, but it didn't. I was able to cut through the tension. So I guess the answer to your question is, after the 6 months of working with it exclusively, what I did learn was the same receptor site that it really works on. And this was the headache clinic out in Washington State. One of my customers brought it and said, hey, I'm working with this. And the reason why it's so effective is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it just goes right in. But the same space is the same space that the intuition works. So intuition needs to be fed. So it had a dual purpose of like intuition, nutrition. So my intuition went sonic. It was not like what it is now. And I felt great. I felt so good, like within those 6 months. And then the holing or the healing, because I had done a lot of the work before, it just became like, I like this candy and I like this candy, until like I hit like, I don't know, like a dog food jelly bean. You know how they have those jelly beans that have disgusting taste, or like a bacon jelly bean, which would be like when I would come up against a shadow archetype or something that I had a limiting belief. And then I used different techniques to just work with it. And my nervous system stopped crashing. This is part of the problem. We don't have the juice, so that when we hit a wall or a limiting belief, the nervous system crashes.
Yeah. So
every migraine is a nervous system. Well, it's constantly crashed. It's like our transformers are completely blown out. So I don't know, do you have any kind of personal practice? Like, do you have a daily practice, or are you just so ruled by migraine?
No, I do. I've been doing Kundalini for the last 3 years. So I have a daily practice there. But it's interesting because when the Kundalini really starts to rise, it does feel like an overload in my system. So I'll be really hyper energized for a couple of days and then I crash out. So I'm a little bit scared of all the things that I know to do to be healthy, like exercise. I cannot exercise because it kills me for like a 3 or 4 days afterwards. I'm laid out. So I'm at a point, like I'm in a new point with migraine for myself. Like I haven't been here before. Like it just yeah, I'm overloaded for sure.
Yeah. It's debilitating.
Yeah, it is.
And that's a biggie. People exercise and then they get a migraine, or they wouldn't go in a sauna and then they get a migraine. So that used to happen to me too. And it's the voltage thing. It's the thing underneath. You're not getting what you need. And I mean, I highly recommend you go to my site and you just read the reviews. They're all real, you know. I made it for me, but I made it for you. What I created doesn't exist, but that's the missing link. It's so what I would say to you. Do you're feeling you're hungover right now? Do you have like a regular headache, or is it more migraine-y, or?
Oh, a migraine. Like migraine, yeah. Migraine is regular headache.
Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 being the worst pain, what's your number?
Like right now?
Yeah.
Oh, like a 2. It's very light. It just feels kind of like a little bit drunk from the pain that I've been in the last couple of days.
Okay, so this is what you can do. This is the SALT test. Did I tell you this, Allison? Did you try it? What'd you say?
I actually made a natural electrolyte solution that I've been drinking, and I feel much, much better from doing that.
So this is what you can do. You have Himalayan salt in your house, right?
I do.
And your kidneys are fine, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I don't measure anything. So just take like 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, Himalayan salt. And I want you to do this test for yourself. I do not recommend this on the regular, but in a pinch. So, and I'm going to look for you to report back to me and tell me.
Okay.
So I really want you to do this because I think it will help you. You take it, 1/8 of a teaspoon, you put it way back under your tongue. There's no taste buds there, but it will leach and it will probably be like, oh, I can't gag. But I don't care. Like medicine doesn't always feel good. And wait 20 minutes. And what I want you to look for is if it has halted the migraine pain, because you can tell when it's rising, intimately your migraine, and or if it's lessening a little bit. And then you can chug like 6 ounces of water. And then I want you to repeat it. So do it 2 times. So this is a 40-minute thing. And I bet you will feel some kind of relief.
Okay.
And it's just because you don't have any electricity in your system, really. You know? Real salt has been sorely disrespected.
Okay.
I mean, salt used to be like sal is for salary, like money. That's how they used to pay people way back in the day. And if more people knew, I'm not talking about like ODing on salt, but we need more salt. Migraineurs need more salt, not less. And not the Mortons, like the pink, the good stuff. So try that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I want to let you guys know that from June 9th, 10th, and 11th, I think. Okay.
Those are the right days. I have them down.
You have them down? Okay, thank you.
Days. Yep.
So if you do try Migraine Magick, Melissa, these two work with my elixirs, but if people who are working with my elixirs, I'm doing a nervous system 3-day complimentary to show them really how, like, once the pain is gone, like how you can really integrate it into the body energetically. Because if you've been doing a lot of Kundalini work, you know, it has to do with the science of angles and, you know, the internal cosmos and the external cosmos. And what the elixirs really do is they really grow your light body, and they help integrate and blend the solar codes that come in and are really preparing people who are leaders, whether they like it, know it, or want it, for the next level that we're morphing into. Because there's a conjunct happening on December 21st, which is just really going to blow everybody out of the water. And so, like, I'm slowly preparing people to be able to rise with those frequencies and to really step into their leadership, or at least not feel this split in themselves, you know? So because we're afraid of being criticized. So, I mean, I still am afraid sometimes, but then I just get to fuck it, do it anyways, you know? Yeah. And plus I have 4 kids banging at the door all the time. So it's like, I just have to go in, do what I need to do, and get out. Yeah. So I am living proof of what is, you know, I went from making myself throw up to try to release tension with migraine to, you know, I have an amazing business that that absolutely lights me up. And I have this beautiful medicine, and I just built a sauna in my backyard. I never liked saunas or anything because I would always get a migraine. Now I'm getting older and I don't like the cold as much. So it turns out it's good for COVID. So I'm right on the money. So I just want to thank you all for hanging out with me today. And
thank you, Lisa. And
you're welcome.
I just used the love elixir, honestly. And yeah, magic is all I really can say.
Yeah, the love elixir is to start transcending all that ancestral wounding, but you can't do it when you're still with the migraine. So the migraine is the first thing for people with migraine. You can't handle the extra energy. You won't feel good. It could give you a migraine, really. Not that it will, but
yeah,
it's just, it's so powerful. It'll just add to the overwhelm. All right, guys. Have a good day. Track
Thank
your
you so
migraine.
much.
You're welcome.
All right.